Kevin Can Fuck Himself is the best show that I've seen in 2021. I know the year's barely over, but I feel comfortable in calling it. Yes, it does have flaws that I'm going to get to, and it's not going to be to everyone's tastes, but I just love the concept so much. It finds such ingenious and unexpected ways of being funny, and I just love this show so damn much in spite of its mistakes that if the show came to life and violently murdered every single person I know, I would still lick the blood off its shoes and say thank you for the privilege of just being in its presence, and no, I'm never going to stop including completely psychotic analogies in my reviews. Deal with it. Kevin Can Fuck Himself is total comedy nerd bait. This is comedy for people who think about comedy too much and can never just relax and enjoy anything for what it is. The show's there to ask the question, what if you were watching a stereotypical vacuous multi-camera network sitcom filmed in front of a live studio audience about the antics of a schlubby self-important man-child covering all the old standards? Kevin tries to attend 2 social engagements in one evening, switching between the 2 without the other finding out. Him and his idiot neighbour start a band, and they aren't very good, but they think that they're amazing. A celebrity guest is in town for a hackneyed steak eating contest. But when his meek and seemingly uninteresting wife, whose role in the series is usually to be the buzzkill, walks off screen, we follow her. And when we do that, the style flips. The audience vanishes. It's single camera now. The light is much greyer, the tone darkens, and we follow all the real-world consequences that this pathetic loser's actions have had on his long-suffering wife, who's been spending their marriage just stood in the background being made to put up with this guy's dumb sitcom shit. You may have noticed that this is basically the exact same principle as applied in BoJack Horseman. BoJack Horseman took the adult animated sitcom format and expanded the typical antics seen in that format and showed that they had actual knock-on effects. BoJack getting a bunch of teenagers he was meant to be looking after drunk wasn't just some wacky storyline, it seriously affected those characters for the years that followed. That's basically what Kevin Can Fuck Himself has done, but with a different target. And God, I fucking needed this. Please, fill the gaping hole left by BoJack Horseman. Someone. Anyone. Of course, the more literary comparison to make is to Tom Stoppard's Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, which, if you've never heard of it, it basically takes 2 incredibly minor characters from Hamlet and shows you what they were doing while the events of Hamlet were going on. And what they were doing was basically spending a lot of time hanging around doing fuck all while they wait for the important characters to show up. Another comparison that people have made is to Breaking Bad, and that works too. The Allison McRoberts story is fairly reminiscent of Walter White's. She got dealt a bad hand. She woke up one day and realised she just wasted 15 years of her life married to a stupid man-child who's pissed away all their life savings, and she just goes, you know what, fuck it. I'm gonna try cocaine. I'm going to have an affair. You know what? I'm going to literally try and kill him and make it look like an accident because honestly, he may be a fun guy to watch, but he is genuinely a worthless human being who's ruined my fucking life and stolen my best years, and honestly, he deserves to die. Hey look everyone, here's Kevin and Neil trying to win a massive novelty foam hat from an arcade. Yeah, this is a fun show, right? The 2 stories and 2 styles contrast with each other so harshly, and yet at the same time they trip off each other so perfectly that it's funny in a way that's kinda similar to internet sensation Don't Hug Me I'm Scared, but not to that extreme of course. The sitcom segments just sit comfortably enough in the uncanny valley. The jokes are lowest common denominator, the level of audience laughter is at just the right level of obnoxious, and the cast are on point. Especially the guy playing Kevin, who has these eyes that give you this blank shop window mannequin stare. It looks exactly like the type of sitcom they're targeting, but things feel slightly off. You are aware that something's not quite right. And so it just makes sense whenever the show cuts back to the single camera dark drama style, and sometimes this happens inside the same scene, and it works perfectly. The show starts out by essentially presenting us with 2 completely different shows playing simultaneously, but you eventually spot a method to the madness as elements from Allison's newfound wild streak start showing up in the background of The Kevin Show. Like when the guy she's hired to kill Kevin shows up at the steak eating contest. You're watching The Kevin Show, and yet we know what Allison's been doing off screen, and that makes these segments transform from a knowing pastiche into something genuinely unsettling. Particularly the jaw-dropping final scene. Although it does admittedly take time for you to see what they're doing with these contrasting styles though, and it will probably test your patience. I was happy with episode 1, happy enough to tweet about it and keep going with it, but it did take me a while to figure out my feelings on it. Initially, I felt it was kind of weird to have a show lampooning vacuous sitcoms and have it be 45 minutes an episode, when to appropriately send up this format, ideally it should be 22-minute episodes, with the action around the events of the sitcom taking up the appropriate amount of time in between scenes until Allison and Patty return from their respective storylines to see what stupid shit Kevin's doing now. Like in Rosencrantz and Guildenstern Are Dead, where they run into scenes from Hamlet mid-action. That was my initial thought, mostly because episode 1 does feel a bit longer than it should be. It's a bit meandering in parts, and you spend most of it going, alright, I get your point, this is what's happening to the sitcom wife off screen, that's your gimmick, but what's your hook? But then episode 2 opens with a beautiful hook of Allison daydreaming about killing her husband, and the show then becomes the incisive character study that it should be, and 45-minute slots start to make more sense. They let the viewers submerge themselves in Allison's newfound crazy lifestyle that's starting to become hectic in an almost similar way to Kevin's. Kevin's problem is that he's a sitcom character and therefore has no depth. He never learns from his experiences, and he never follows through on anything, and he's always obsessed with something new week in, week out. Even the idea that he and Allison should have kids together is just another crazy idea on The Kevin Show. It's not something they're doing together for the right reasons, it's all about him. People have been reading this as a commentary on self-important sitcom husbands who make their wives go through hell based off some crazy new venture each week, as is demanded by the format, and they never seem to give their wives' needs a passing thought, and the way the wife puts up with this shit is being played for laughs. But this analysis I always feel is half done whenever I see Kevin Can Fuck Himself described as principally being about the implicit misogyny of many a sitcom's husband and wife dynamic, which, don't get me wrong, it is, but it's half of it. The base of a sitcom husband who has the world handed to him on a platter and who never gives a shit about anyone but himself for comic effect would actually be a terrible human being and his wife would genuinely despise him is just one step of the commentary. Because here's the thing, in the end, Allison is no better a human being than Kevin is, and the show does know that. Yes, Kevin lives his life like a series of wacky sitcom adventures, but so does Allison. The only difference between the two is tone. One week Kevin starts a band, next week he has a chili cook-off, next week he wants a baby. Conversely, one week Allison wants to move house, next week she fantasizes about killing her husband. Next week she lies to everyone about why she's going out of town so she can source the pills that she can use to kill her husband. Next week she has an affair with an old friend. Next week she pressures Patty into sneaking around behind her new girlfriend's back. Allison's spiral of self-destructive narcissism begins to reflect Kevin's, and this is illustrated by the fact that Allison's storylines begin to show up in the sitcom segments with more prominence as time goes by. This is a Walter White transformation from boring everyday guy into a monster by way of bleeding entirely separate formats together. I have never seen a show use changing its format as a way of constructing a character arc before. A lot of shows get called innovative, but Kevin Can Fuck Himself is truly innovative. And yet, while I found Kevin Can Fuck Himself to be utterly beautiful and the most compulsive viewing experience that I've had since BoJack Horseman ended, there is one huge problem with it. We know she's not going to kill Kevin. She seems determined, but then we see her struggle with doubt. Patty doesn't trust that she'll actually do it. Allison then puts her foot down and says, no, we're doing it, but we're doing it my way. But then she gets emotional. She starts remembering those moments of her life where Kevin didn't seem like such a bad guy. She must have liked him at one point to get married in the first place, and he doesn't mean to be a complete fuck-up, it's just the way he is. But no, we know that something's gonna get in the way. They're not gonna kill off the point of the show, especially since AMC announced a season 2 before I'd even finished watching season 1, and the fact the show is continuing is a spoiler in itself, which is why I just didn't feel a need to put a spoiler warning in this video, and if anyone's gonna complain at me about that, why? Does your brain even work? I mean, I don't know what else they could have done. The plot of this thing was always going to be sitcom wife hates her husband and finds herself with a desire to poison the stupid bastard, but if the show has any hope of longevity, I know that she won't. Shows having foregone conclusions isn't always a problem, but the entire series deals with the question, will she or won't she go through with it, which is why bringing up Hamlet is so appropriate. But because it's a TV show and not a self-contained miniseries or movie, this isn't a question that the audience is actively wondering about. Well, maybe they were before AMC announced a season 2, but not after it. In the flash forwards in episode 7, when Allison's talking to the police after an incident involving a shooting and the dialogue conveniently sidesteps whether Kevin is alive or dead at this time, the show clearly wants me to be wondering whether he's alive or dead, but I'm not. And I know that he's not going to end up being dead, no matter how much the show clearly wants me to not know the answer to this question. This does end up being a relatively minor nitpick though, because the show is so light shines out of its arse wonderful in literally every other department. You could also argue that it effectively illustrates how Allison's life is turning into a sitcom just like her husband's. Neither of them can change the status quo in any meaningful way because that would break the format. So they're both just stuck in this cycle where Kevin is oblivious that his wife utterly despises him and wants him dead, and Allison has all these doubts about it and ends up self-sabotaging. And I love watching it, don't get me wrong, it's a gorgeous character study. It's just not quite the crime thriller that it clearly wants to be. Anyway, if you like this video, why not leave a comment congratulating me on my incisive critique of Kevin Can Fuck Himself? Why not subscribe and tell your friends about all the interesting points I bring up? And then you can watch my entire back catalogue and listen to me criticise other TV shows for hours on end. Because I have been told by many people that I contribute such interesting, enlightening points to any discussion that I enter, and I am one of the most intelligent critics on the whole of YouTube. Oh, my producer's just handed me a sandwich. How nice. Thanks, Sandy. Yeah, I think this is the first time you've shown up in one of my videos, isn't it? You first joined the channel in... when was it? 2013, wasn't it? Wow, it's coming up on 10 years, Sandy. You've been with us a long time. There's a bit of a bitter aftertaste in this sandwich. Did you know that, Sandy? What did you put in it? Yeah. I feel faint.